Jagex has released a new blog regarding the prayer book with all of their ideas for additional prayers. I'm very happy to see they are taking the book in the direction I was hoping, focusing on things like extra damage received and heavier prayer drain for heavily increased offensive output and additional recoil damage. I'm actually very happy with most of the ideas laid out. I'll be going over each one and discussing my overall thoughts at the end. Overprotection protects 2 items on death, but drains prayer by 25% of damage taken while active. This is a really good idea for a more unique protect item prayer. This allows you to risk another item in PvP encounters, but at the risk of losing 2 additional items should you get smited. This combined with the fact PKers are getting an even more draining smite prayer makes it very risky to bring 2 expensive items with you. Likely you'll grab a couple cheaper items that wouldn't break your bank if you lost them. I'm not a PKer, but I do participate in some wildy content, and this one sounds interesting to me. Rejuvenation. While active, regenerate 1 HP every 20 seconds. To quote them as well, this would likely have a hefty drain rate attached so that it's not worth it just leaving on forever. The new prayer book needs to have rapid heal for the purpose of resetting your regen cooldown, but rapid heal with a high prayer drain rate is equally as useless as rapid heal already was. I don't mind this one not being particularly useful or interesting, since it is a necessary function. It really just needs to be on the book somewhere. I prefer it have the same drain rate as rapid heal, since the prayer book has loads of different trade-offs anyway. Dampen. This is 3 protection prayers for melee magic and ranged. Reduces damage from the appropriate style by 90%. These are literally just new overhead prayers that reduce damage by only 90% instead of 100%. These seem to be the most divisive of all the prayers, and for good reason. Quiet prayers is an invocation at raids 3 with the same effect, and it is easily the hardest invocation to add due to the added damage at every encounter. The reason no one uses quiet prayers is because the reward of 20 invocation level is simply not worth the added danger, besides maybe for 500 speedruns. In the case of this prayer book, the reward for choosing these is a tremendous amount of power. I've seen a lot of people complain that chip damage is annoying and should be avoided as a mechanic, but chip damage is not necessarily bad. It's used well all throughout Tob, Maiden, Nilo King, and Verzik P3. I personally am not sure if this trade-off is too much for the book, but I would love to see it be put into the beta and tested just to see if they can still be used at different activities. Absorb, another set of protection prayers for melee magic and ranged again. Reduces damage from the appropriate style by 100%, but drains prayer points by 10% of the mitigated damage, on top of typical prayer drain. 2 sets of protection overheads. Neat idea. So we have quiet prayers and now we have deadly prayers, except this one is much more punishing on the prayer. But either can be used at will. I'm not sure how this would look in practice. You likely would only use this for massive hits, and even then it would drain an immense amount of prayer when it did so. I had an idea for a second set of fragile protection prayers instead, giving 100% protection, but only for maximum amount of hits before breaking and entering a cooldown before it could be used again. Maybe like 5 hits per minute or something like that. This could be used for those occasional massive hits, but with a bit more thought behind it. Would be very cool at places like Maiden, where you can have people tank in your place. You could constantly swap people in front of the boss with the full protection prayers. Either way, second set of protection prayers, neat idea. Ancient Precision, Strength, Sight, Will. This is a 20% boost to stats of each style. These basically are just filler prayers for people without the level to use the later ones. There's nothing wrong with them, and there's not much to talk about. Trinitas. 15% accuracy and strength boost to all combat styles, and it's only accuracy for magic. This is the only prayer that I think is poorly designed on the entire prayer book. It's a prayer meant to ease people into PvM by taking away the need to switch offensive prayers on the incredibly dangerous and difficult to use new prayer book?
Huh?
Not only does it go against the entire theme of the prayer book, it's simply a bad addition to the game. It encourages not learning a basic skill that is important in all PvM encounters. A crutch to avoid learning something not only doesn't fit on this prayer book, but doesn't fit in the game period. Very few people would use this prayer, which is why I don't think it's being talked about much, but this is absolutely one I would vote no to. Ruinous Smite reduces your opponent's and your own prayer points by 33% of damage dealt. This one sounds interesting. I'm not a PKer, so this literally only affects Muzpa and escaping from PKers for me. Interesting that it needs to be fueled by your own prayer points. Might be a bit too much drain on the user, but it's hard to tell without being put in a beta. Gambit increases your accuracy with all combat styles by 1% per 3% missing HP. So that's 33% increased accuracy at 1 HP. This is probably the most interesting prayer offered. This is an overhead prayer that can be used alongside the offensive boost prayers, meaning it could be flicked to between protection prayers. I'm not sure how I feel about that low life mechanic. This basically requires you bring a locator orb everywhere, and even if you do that, there are cases where attacks are coming at you where you can't use the locator orb, which is really annoying. This pairs very well with the new redemption prayer, which we will get into in a bit, but I think a flat buff probably would make more sense than scaling with lower HP. Hugo, another PVMer and Twitch streamer, made a suggestion that it boosts accuracy by a flat 10%, but boosts special attack accuracy by 30%. This would make it still worth flicking to between attacks, but also fix defense draining meta somewhat by allowing BGS and hammers to land more consistently. Rebuke reflects 15% of damage taken, but increases damage taken by 25%. Is an overhead. This is a great idea for a prayer and is that vengeance buff I was looking for in my main prayer suggestions. On its own, the prayer really has very little use, but when paired with vengeance, it would increase the damage you take, in turn increasing vengeance's damage and adding some more recoil damage on top. It's not going to be widely used everywhere, but will make vengeance meta over thralls in quite a few places, which is good. At Calphi Queen, for example, her max hit would increase from 31 to 38, allowing potential maximum recoil with vengeance and the prayer combined to 34 instead of 23, which is a pretty big increase. Decimate, Annihilate, and Vaporize. These are 20% attack and 30% strength boost for both melee and ranged, and a 25% attack boost and 4% damage boost for magic. These are dramatically more powerful offensive prayers at the cost of no defense boost whatsoever. This is a 7% strength bonus for melee and ranged, and plus 4% magic damage boost. I've seen a lot of people downplaying the power increase here. This adds an effective 8 strength levels, or 11 ranged levels. This is 3 base max hits to Scythe in max melee, or 4 base max hits on task. Because the way Scythe works, this is effectively plus 6 max hits due to the triple hit splat. For T-Bone max range, it's 6 max hits both on or off task. Its max hit on task against max mage level will be 94. Even that tiny magic damage boost is 1 max hit for shadow off task or 2 on task. I've seen Reddit threads say that it should be plus 25% ranged or melee damage over rigor and piety, which is hilariously broken. For fun, I calced if this was the case. The max hit of T-Bow off task gets increased from 77 to 96, a measly 19 max hits. I think the prayers as described in the blog are an appropriate DPS increase for the trade-offs. Vindication. When reduced below 10% of your maximum HP, without taking lethal damage, Vindication will heal you for 15% of your prayer level, draining 100% of your remaining prayer points, and upon activation, grant 10% bonus damage on your next attack. This was my suggestion for my video. This is by far the one I wanted to see added the most, and I'm very glad to see it. A damage buff to encourage proccing redemption repeatedly at the cost of prayer points is a really cool and interesting concept. One problem though. Vindication heals 15% of prayer points instead of redemption's full 25%. This means that it heals 14 instead of 24. This would make it unusable for both Vespula and Tightrope Skip, as it heals far too little to survive. Honestly, the prayer book has enough trade-offs. Make this prayer the exact same healing as redemption with that damage buff, and it sounds balanced to me. It already costs all your prayer points to activate as is. The fact it wouldn't work at all in places you use redemption is kind of silly. Metabolize. Eating delay is reduced by 0.6 seconds while active. When disabled, your action delay would be reset to your weapon's attack speed or left unchanged to prevent flicking. Effectively, what that means is eating wastes 2 ticks instead of 3. Cool idea for a buff to hard food to make it more usable. Would this work for potions as well? Because potions don't add any attack delay, but do take 3 ticks before you can sip again. If not, combo eating is going to be awkward with different delays on each. The prayer also would have a side effect of allowing 2-tick barb fishing by flicking the prayer on and off, which is a hilarious thought. Would also likely allow 2-ticking in various other locations too. This would probably take an engine change to prevent that, or if they just allow it, it would be a massive buff to skilling in general. I like this prayer as a concept and would like to see it in action. Wrath. While active, deal damage equal to 25% of your prayer level in a 5x5 radius around you on death. This is what Nex uses when you kill her. It's super retribution. Not much to mention here. Ruinous Grace. While active, drain prayer points instead of run energy. This drain rate is modified by prayer bonus and does not take into account effects like stamina. This is an interesting idea, probably very rarely used, just like Vile Vigor. If it dramatically scales with prayer bonus, this could see some use in interesting places like CMs, or many skilling locations like ZMI. Conservation. While active, you have a chance to prevent a resource from depleting when harvested. Okay, these are the skilling prayers. These are all as boring as I expected them to be, and I would prefer to just not get skilling prayers at all, but I don't see anything too horribly wrong with this. This one would be nice anywhere resources deplete, like redwoods or amethyst. It's a big buff to AFK. Ancient Abundance. While active, increases success chance while gathering. This is incredibly boring, and it's a big buff to skilling. I wouldn't vote no to this, but this doesn't really add anything to the game at the same time. Ancient Offering. While active, you have a 75% chance to destroy a resource when obtaining it, but drains 1 additional prayer point whenever a resource is destroyed. This one is absolutely insane at places like barb fishing, teak trees, and granite. It will require a lot of prayer potions to upkeep, which could be kind of annoying, but I'm not against the addition of this. Okay, that was a lot. I think the majority of these are at least interesting and should be put into a beta. Overwhelmingly, Reddit responded by saying they were not interested in these whatsoever. From what I saw, they either want the prayers to instead be a direct upgrade because it comes from a Grandmaster quest, which is beyond stupid, or they just found the prayers uninteresting in general. Nothing could be more boring than making these a direct upgrade. These prayers are a chance to flesh out PVM and increase the skill cap across the entire game. Direct upgrades change nothing and simply add power creep for no reason. Jagex offered a feedback form, which I will leave in the description for you guys to give them your feedback. One of the questions on there is incredibly worrying to me. Would you be interested in us exploring a weaker version of Soul Split as a reward? As a prior RS3 player, Soul Split is meta-shattering and should never be added to the game in any form. Soul Split is an overhead prayer on the Ancient Prayer Book in RS3 that Nex uses that heals for 10% of damage dealt. This used to be much higher and has been nerfed repeatedly over the years. For comparison, Blood Fury is effectively 6% healing for melee only, but is not consistent like Soul Split. And keep in mind the two of these would stack together. Blood Fury has the trade-off of less damage, but any high-level player will tell you it's not even a consideration whether you bring Torture or Blood Fury in almost every case. You always take Blood Fury. Even if Soul Split only healed 5%, this would remove the need for food from nearly every activity and shatter the existing metas at all locations. Not to mention you would be able to tick-eat all enemies by simply attacking them. JMods have said repeatedly they would never add Soul Split, so I was never worried about them adding it in the past, but now it appears they are at least somewhat open to it. This cannot be added to the game for the sake of the health of PVM. Make sure to give your feedback with the link in the description. I also wanted to mention the lack of one-tick flicking mentioned in this blog whatsoever. Jagex in the prayer blog prior to this one stated they would make it impossible to one-tick flick as a trade-off. So I assume they're sticking to this plan since it wasn't mentioned at all. I see absolutely no reason to prevent one-tick flicking with all of the prayers listed. It seems incredibly arbitrary, kind of like the lack of spec orb in the wilderness, except it's worse than that. It makes it much harder to flick prayers for no real reason. Not only lowering the skill cap, it also simply makes prayer flicking even more annoying than it already can be. If you haven't done much prayer flicking, don't be fooled by the naming convention. Lazy flicking is not any worse or easier than one-tick flicking. It's actually usually a lot more effort than one-tick flicking. One-tick flicking is balanced by the inability to do anything else while doing it. You need to just stand there and flick. Reddit claiming it is simply infinite prayer points is ridiculously ignorant. Being unable to one-tick flick just makes Inferno and high-level Toa more annoying to run. It doesn't really affect any other content in the entire game, so this change is completely pointless and arbitrary. I also found this great Reddit comment, which is honestly very respectable, and I totally agree with it. He says, "Hate to be a doomsayer, but I don't know enough about the high-end max gear methods of gameplay to know enough which way to vote to be healthy for the game. I've heard numerous max players who HM Tob or run 450 scaled Toas say that the DPS buffs are huge and worth the trade-off, but then the average player saying it's not rewarding enough. I feel like leaving this up to the loudest voice, even if that's the nature of the game development, may not be in the best interest of the game. I personally felt no strong feelings one way or the other, but I have no idea what's for the best. I really hope the more learned players come out of lurking and make sure this isn't where the vocal minority / player polling system ruins the game." Too long didn't read. the community is omega divided on which way it should go, maybe we don't need it at all. I would hate to see us add something that could threaten the long-term health of the game because 1, we don't want to rescind the offer to have it, or 2, vocal reception forces us to shoehorn it in. The higher level player base knows how ridiculous adding this many max it is, and Jagex needs to stick to their guns and not cave to the majority. The poll for these prayers is to see if these should be added to a beta, not if they should be added, period. If they simply scrap all of these ideas without ever testing them because Reddit complained, it would be a huge waste. I also agree if they aren't confident they can get the prayer book right, they should simply not add it. This is the biggest update to PVM in OSRS's history, affecting every monster encounter in the game. We need to get it right. I'll be discussing these prayers more tonight on my live stream at Twitch while doing CMs, Inferno, and Toa. So come pop in if you're around. And that's it for the video. Leave a like if you liked it, and/or subscribe. Thanks, guys.